Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. This is take 3 of my intro because I hate intros and they're so difficult sometimes for me. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about more things to do with brewing coffee at home and making tasty coffee at home, because I think having tasty coffee at home is always nice to have.
Dude,
it's great.
I've
been brewing more coffee at home than I have. I've actually lowered my cafe visitation intake quite dramatically. I was going from a daily visit to almost a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly. I don't know.
For sure. I mean, here's a question I thought. Can you still be a home barista if you're a real barista? That was almost savage of me to say.
That is controversial. That is, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to reframe that so I don't offend anyone. Can you still be a home barista if you're a professional barista, like a paid barista?
Right. Well, can you be a home barista and be a professional barista? Can you be a professional by being a home barista?
Yeah. Can you be a professional home barista because you get paid via YouTube? Are you a home barista?
Or is professional just because you get paid?
Well, I think the definition of professional is something you do for a profession. A profession is dictated by
But
pay.
Professional doesn't mean like an expert in your field.
By
pro.
definition, it does not. I don't
really?
think I'm gonna
Interesting.
I'm gonna fact check myself.
I just learned this. Wow. Okay.
Professional means you just make quote unquote you have a profession.
Okay. So if you, as a home barista, won a latte art throwdown and you got paid for it, does that make you a professional?
So definition from the Oxford Dictionary is
Let's go.
Relating to or belonging to a profession.
Oh, okay.
Engaged in a specified activity as one's main paid occupation rather than as a pastime.
Interesting.
It can't be a hobby.
Is that different than being a pro?
Noun. So that's an adjective. So if you're describing someone, a professional barista, that's a descriptor. It's an adjective. But if you're you are a professional.
Yeah.
A person engaged or qualified in a profession. So it could mean that you have the knowledge around something. You're qualified to speak on this or to educate on that. Could a person engaged in specified activity, especially a sport or a branch of performing arts, as a main paid occupation rather than as a pastime. A lot of the definition, majority of the definition around the word professional has to do with money.
Wow.
So if you're a barista at home that's not getting paid, you're not a professional.
You're pretty
barista.
Much not a professional.
But the reality is, if you're a barista at home that gets paid via
what happens
YouTube,
if you're a home barista and you won a latte art throwdown and you got paid? Have you officially stepped into the realm of being a professional?
Well, you technically didn't get paid to compete.
Well, what if you got paid
won.
Oh man,
yeah.
This is in the weeds,
friends.
Little did you know you were gonna tune into this podcast and figure out and get down to the details of what a professional is. Wow.
Yeah. I think that's a valid topic to talk about, because we are in a time where the idea of what it means to be a coffee professional is growing and expanding and changing on a level that I don't think we can really comprehend, because you and I never talked about this. This is a complete riff. this wasn't even our plan for an episode, right. But the reality is that's a very good point, is you can be a coffee professional that only brews coffee at home.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
Would you argue as not true?
Well, according to that definition, you technically can't argue with that.
Yeah, you can, right? If you have a successful YouTube,
right,
and you haven't opened a roasting company yet,
right?
I'm talking about Kyle Roselle's heyday.
Right.
Was he a coffee professional? Yeah.
He was.
He was.
Dude, still is.
I mean, just now cranking. He's on another level.
Just cranking. Right. All right, let's pour some batch before it cools down. Speaking of, definitions and words, this could be attributed to coffee, and because this coffee podcast, it's very coffee oriented and focused. But just in general, I think our definitions of words has been so screwed up over the last 6 years that like words sometimes don't even mean anything. And part of it is, I don't know, maybe this is a little too controversial, to like lack of like the fear of like offending somebody by saying it how it is according to the word, where we're trying to be over like extremely inclusive that we have to change the definitions of words. And now it's like, I mean, specifically in coffee, it's like, yeah, can you like saying, hey, you can't, like, you're not a professional would be like, whoa, but I can brew coffee better than anybody else. I mean, that could be true.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Realistically, that could be true, but you're not. That's the definition, which means I think gosh.
Yeah.
Man,
You're getting excited.
I know. I think we, at that point, like, need to be able to come up with some new words.
Yeah.
Or
totally.
You know, just new words that can explain different parts without changing, you know, existing words.
Yeah. But
if that makes sense.
You're totally right, because I think there's a few things happening, and I might get a little woo-woo for some people and a little weird here. But I think we are going through as humanity, I think, is going through a little bit of a quantum shift here, where we're changing and evolving so quickly that I think we sometimes can't fully keep up. And by that, I mean, like, because language is by far how culture is defined, when our language changes and shifts, it's due to a change that most people may not have fully realized. So culture shifting, and we're using different terminology, so therefore we create different words. A good way to one way to think about it is, like, imagine the fact that a lot of our communication is now via emojis, right? And depending on what emoji, like the whole wind emoji, if you post it, like, what does that mean? Depending on context and depending on your communication or relatability with the person, with the culture, and with your demographic of people, right? You know the whole thing. You know the little emoji that goes like this? What does it mean? Like, you know, the two fingers, the two hands that go like this?
Like this?
Yeah.
So
it means heart, right?
Yeah, I just
found that out last week.
I learned that like 2 months ago or something.
Yeah. Like, you see what I mean?
I guess in other cultures, it's common to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never seen that ever up until like 2 months ago.
Right? I had no idea. Like, man, it's like, I mean, you can get even funny. Like, the whole, I mean, all of like the amount of emojis that mean different things. Like, you definitely don't want to post the eggplant emoji in the wrong context.
Right? Exactly. That
might be a problem.
You need context. That one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So especially now with these new iOS updates, I mean, they're adding emojis left and right for everything now, dude. But yeah, I think. Yeah, that wording, the whole word situation is causing it's causing like a lot of misunderstanding and like chaos a little bit, I think, with like things like, you know, light roast. Like, light roast does not mean what it meant 5, 6, 8 years ago. Like, fermentation does not mean what it used to mean.
No,
like,
exactly.
It is crazy. And then, I mean, there's just like a lot of things, like what qualifies you as a barista, like what qualifies you as a roaster, like it's a little dicey, and dude, I don't know.
Are you a producer just because you have a house plant, with a coffee house plant?
Right 100%.
But yeah, what do you think of the batch?
Honestly, I think it's just okay.
Same.
I've been brewing this coffee for the last week on V60, on Oria. now on batch brew.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping it would actually taste better on batch brew. Sometimes these batch brews taste better than all my filter coffees like my filter brews, but it doesn't.
No.
And I don't know.
No, your hand brew that you did the other day for me tastes better than this, but
It's true, it did.
Yeah.
It did taste better. It had a little bit more
zippy,
clarity.
It was clear. It had clarity.
Yeah,
It was
clean.
just like crispy. Yeah.
But even that wasn't like...
It wasn't as punchy.
It was good. It was good.
It wasn't as punchy as some of the coffees that we're about to drop.
Yes, that's true.
I said that, even though I love this roaster.
Do we disclose the roaster?
No, we got to forgive him.
Yeah, because...
He's a heavy hitter.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We all have our days.
Yeah, that's
So,
fine.
It's fine. Yeah. But this is a washed Ethiopian, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
The Chilbesa, grade 1. Pretty, I mean, the Chilbesa, I think, was like, within like a span of a month, I saw like 5-10 roasters drop.
Yeah.
It just like spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
So seems like it was like a solid
Good green buy.
good green, yeah. But yeah.
Again, I gotta say, like,
No.
I'm not picking up like roast defects, or I'm not like picking up that this coffee is quote unquote roasty or quote unquote green or underdeveloped. I'm not picking that up.
That's the tough part always is like if it's not tasting like over or under or roasty or under or like you're like, what's going on here? Like it's just neither nothing.
Yeah. And I also would say like this batch is fairly dialed. Like it's tasting fine.
Yeah. So
what we were gonna talk about? Oh, dude, this topic, the age-old topic, and I mean maybe listeners are like, dude, y'all have talked about this again. We have, but I think the difference with this is like there's always so much things happening within the home barista crowd. There's so much things happening within the gear crowd, within tech and all of that. Like, so it's worth revisiting. One of the things I noticed is like people continue to ask whether you're a seasoned home barista or you're about to dive into brewing coffee at home as a brewing
as
coffee
a profession
at home as in a way to I think, a side note, Jimmy posted this a while ago about how much money would you save if you brewed coffee at home and stuff like that. Like, so maybe you're making a switch and you're like, okay, like I love good coffee, I drink specialty coffee, I drink like $10 filters, but I want to brew some filters at home now. Or you're someone who's like, yeah, I brew coffee at home more than in a cafe. I think the universal question is like, what do I need for my setup, or is my setup good enough?
Right.
And I don't think that question goes away whether you have all the gear or you don't. Or let's say you've been an avid home barista and you've been brewing coffee like just filters, V60s at home, and you're looking to dive into espresso. Like, you have the knowledge of what coffee is, what coffee tastes like, and then you're also like listening to Lance, looking at Kyle Roselle's archives, and you're diving into all of the espresso stuff, and you're trying to figure that out. I think the question doesn't go away. It's like, where should I start with gear? And that's why I think for us, it's also evolved a lot. We've brewed on a lot of different home setups,
Yes.
And I think that's part of the thing is I personally went from just brewing filters at home to diving into more espresso. Especially when you and I lived together, we had 2 espresso machines on our counter for a while.
It was a full house there
was
for
a full
second.
house. It was pretty wild.
You could brew every variety, every origin on a unique grinder.
Exactly. So I think that question really never goes away, so it's worth revisiting quite often. So with that said, I think one of the things I'd like to kind of dive into is how if you were to rebuild your coffee setup today, what style of extraction would you lean into?
You mean the like brew method wise, or?
Yeah.
I'm still a huge fan of filter, to be honest. I like espresso. It's good. I brew more espresso at home right now than I've ever brewed.
Yeah.
Not that I brew a lot of it. I mean, literally just like maybe a few shots a week, like barely any. So I like a good filter setup, and I think I would do more of that. Even though right now I'm trying to find like another machine I could buy to swap out for my dual boiler right now. My Breville dual boiler. So I'm looking at potentially seeing if I can upgrade my espresso setup, but I'm also like, again, filter heavy on my preference. I'd love to get a batch brewer.
You don't.
And I don't know why. Honestly, probably not even because I'm gonna use it really. Just I don't know. I just want one just in case, just to brew. Because I don't know. I feel like my experience and my thoughts about batch brewers has shifted so much over the last like 5-6 years, where I'm like, it's actually something I would consider using regularly. So I don't know. That's where I'm at. What about yourself?
Yeah. Honestly, we've kind of reorganized at home. So I don't know if you noticed last time you were here, like Maddie and I built a whole like coffee bar. No. So it's quite large. It's quite a big coffee bar. We haven't like done the decorations of like photos and stuff about that I really want to do for like photos. So I haven't posted about it. But we have quite a bit like right now in the coffee bar, and I'm thinking like, according to my home habits, and again, this is so hard because I'm brewing so much coffee outside of the house, but according to my home habits, I'm brewing filter now way more than I ever have. And that's like, I think because I revisited some old recipes where I was just like, okay, like I actually really, really like this filter recipe, and it tastes different than my work recipe, and therefore I'm enjoying coffees in a new way.
Right.
And even if I bring coffees from work home, I can enjoy them differently at home, and which is exciting for me. With that said, if I had to replace or upgrade some of the gear, I'm still on the Weber train. I don't know if that's old news, if people are like over the Weber workshop stuff. Like, I still would absolutely love to replace one of my grinders, because I have 3 grinders on bar. I would like to replace one of them for the Weber key, because I think it looks super dope and it does a really good job. Not the EG1. Like, I mean, if you have an EG1 at home, then... I
mean, technically, with all your entire setup, you could sell probably most of your setup and get an EG1.
Yeah. No, for sure. I could.
That's probably a really good move.
My setup is like quite expensive at home. But
it's probably a really good move.
I don't know.
I mean, if I was you, that's what I would do. I would sell most of what
everything
you have
and
then get an EG1 with. I mean,
I could.
You don't have to sell your filter stuff. And then I don't know.
I mean, I could literally just keep my and just be predominant. That's actually, you're tempting me.
And then you have a really minimalistic setup, but it's like clean. I mean, the EG1.
What EG1's $3,500?
I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
Or this is very off the cuff. I've been like dreaming about getting like an old EK, like something like really old, like back when they were just starting to get popular, and just kind of polish it up, maybe clean it up, maybe paint it like some kind of like unique color, just like mod it a little bit, touch it up. I don't know, just for kicks. Like restore like an old one. I don't know. Dude, not that it needs restoring.
I'm no longer on the EK. Like, I would like, even within the context of this conversation, like I wouldn't recommend the EK.
Right. That's what I'm saying is I probably wouldn't get like what we have right now.
Yeah.
If I were to get
2 EKs.
If I were to get one, I'd get like an older one.
Yeah.
For the vibe, because they have like this weird like Lego retro look to them.
Yeah.
But anyways, you could easily get an EG1 for that.
Yeah,
That'd be excellent.
I'll have to talk about that. That'll be that'll be a nice little addition to the bar. Create more content, be a professional home barista. But yeah, I think that's what I would say. Now, to take a step back, like if I didn't have anything, and I think let's break it down to like, if you didn't have any gear right now and you wanted to dive into espresso, I'm not gonna give a budget here. What are you buying for an espresso machine?
Well, no budget. That makes things hard. Because then, I mean, you could the sky's the limit.
Well, that's my question. Is like, would you recommend like a Slayer espresso for someone who's like just getting into espresso?
Oh, well, if you're just getting into espresso,
Your first setup. Let's say this is your first setup.
I don't know, like the trusty Brevels are like always
Right?
like I hate to admit or recommend that because they're so basic and they're so like classic and traditional. And mind you, don't stone me. I have a dual boiler at home. I've had I've had
You've
multiple
had two or
dual
three of
boilers.
them, yeah.
I've had a Breville Oracle, the 980. But yeah, I think they're just good, like bang for your buck, ton of features packed in, fairly affordable, and they can get you like a good chunk of the way there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room to just, especially if you're just getting started, you can like fine tune your skills, your abilities, learn how to dial in. You can go so far with those machines before you're like, okay, I need something different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why I would recommend them. Or, you know, like I don't mind like a Profitec, some of the lower ones. I'm kind of blinking on the name, like a 400, I believe. They're still like, I think the Pro 400 is still like a dual boiler, or like the newest Profitec that they released, which is a dual boiler, but it's like smaller, compact size. So it's just like fun and I don't know. So that's where my mind goes. And then of course you need like a solid grinder, and grinders I think is where it's hard.
It's much harder.
Yeah, grinders are not accessible nowadays.
Yeah.
like especially like a decent espresso grinder, they have not come down in like the way machines I think have gotten down. So
I mean,
I don't know.
That's like one thing that reminds me of like our friend Sam, like picked up a Breville Bambino, and it was like $200 at like Home Goods or something.
Yeah.
It's like super inexpensive. And for a while, I don't know if he still does that. We used to like, he'd buy mirror and we pre-grind it for him for a week. And then he'd use that on espresso. And like, shockingly enough, the results weren't awful.
Yeah.
Like, weren't bad.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So especially if you're cranking out iced lattes, like I gotta say, like Breville Bambino will get the job done for your iced lattes. Like especially depends on what kind of coffee you're drinking at home. Like you can get caffeine level coffee at home with a Breville Bambino, and I won't be mad if you make me a bevy.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Pretty much.
So, and that's where I'm like, I think the entry level for like espresso with decent results is fairly low nowadays. And you don't have to worry about like having like very poor coffee. I choose a Breville Bambino over a Keurig any day, and I think they're almost equivalent in price.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which is weird,
right?
Like,
that is a weird.
Yeah. And that's the other factors. Like, what do you? I think when people are trying to decide what gear to start with or even upgrade, like the question has to do is like, okay, like what's wrong with your gear that you have now? You have to answer that question.
Right.
Like, why are you upgrading? You have to answer that question, right?
Right.
Is it quality or is it convenience?
Right.
Like, so those are your key questions. And then if you're getting into this home barista thing, like, what do you want? Are you trying to save money? Well, if you're trying to save money, you're not going to invest 10 grand in a home setup.
Right.
That's obvious. But if you're trying to up your quality, then like your decisions are going to be much different. And I think one of the cool things is like the barrier to entry right now with home gear is fairly low, and you can get very tasty stuff, but then sky's almost the limit if you want to upgrade.
Right.
Because for me, I did use the Breville quite a bit, and I loved it at home. It was great. It was just what I needed as someone who already works in coffee.
Yes.
That I sometimes just want to, fool around with like, oh, okay, like I want to make a shot of espresso, this and that.
Right.
The other thing is I went from that to a flare, and I'll be honest, like flares are awesome. I probably wouldn't always recommend a flare as your entry level machine to brew at home because they're a little more challenging to brew on. You have to kind of know what you're doing to brew on a flare. But I would absolutely recommend a flare if you're looking to add another way of making espresso, because flare espresso tastes way different than, I would say, Breville shot of espresso, just because you manually can control, and manual control of pressure is so much different than a machine or like a rotary pump control of pressure, right? So especially with the amount of pre-infusion that I'm doing on these shots, and with my grinder, the Vario W Plus, like the combo of the flare and that, plus Tanner gave me the Unibasket from Weber, then that's I would say that's a advanced one. I'm looking for like levels, like in video games, like levels.
Right.
I think this is an advanced level of espresso at home. It's a little more complicated. So, and it's also a little more interesting to me because I obviously work in a cafe and I make espresso on a Linea, or a Linea PB, not a mini, but a big machine. And I'm also coming home and I'm very intrigued by the coffee I make through a flare. Very much so, because it's different. I mean, that's a little rant on the flare, and that's where I would recommend, like, hey, if you're curious, you have the budget, and you're like, I have all these machines, whatever, like you have a Linea Mini, but you want to add a little twist to your bar, I would say a flare would be a fun little option.
The flare that you have also is kind of like the more higher end one.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's some like if you want to like tinker, I think it might be beneficial. And if you like the lever experience, it's affordable at that point. But yeah, if you're just looking for like, hey, you're getting into espresso and you want to get a machine, I think actually just going for like a Breville might be the smarter choice. I mean, for like the reasons that you're saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, like the other side of this is like finding a really solid grinder, and that's probably as more important than anything.
Yeah.
Like I would recommend like getting a lower tier espresso machine and a high tier grinder.
Yeah.
Versus
100%.
the opposite, because it's gonna dictate. I mean, most of your flavor. Like you can deal with maybe a little bit of fluctuation in temp in your machine. But if your grind size is not cutting it, and it's not uniform, and it's not giving you a great quality consistency, then nothing's going to fix that. Yeah. Nothing in your machine can fix that.
Okay.
So
with that said, question for you and all the listeners. Do I sell my Comandante, my competition Ode with Gorilla Gear burrs and customized, and my Vario W Plus, or the new one? Do I sell all three of those and buy a Weber key? I wouldn't be able to sell those and swap for a EG1, but a key.
You'd have to sell some more gear, gear.
Just grinder for grinder, so 3 grinders for 1.
But you can keep your Comandante probably.
You think I can sell the 2 for 1?
Yeah.
No, like I think the key is like, isn't it like 1,300?
Yeah. So your Vario is like
Vario for, let's
600.
Say, yeah,
I guess.
No, secondhand I sell it for 400.
Yeah.
Probably sell my
You're right.
Ode for about 2
You're
or
right.
3.
You'd have to sell all of them. Yeah. So
and then sell my 2.
I don't know.
I'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, but I think actually working with filter coffee is probably going to be a lot easier than espresso. I think filter coffee, I remember when I was just getting into it, it's just like you need a grinder, a cone, and a kettle.
Yeah.
And the scales now, I mean, you don't need the Akai scale to be realistic.
No.
But I mean, you can also, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
It's extremely dialed in. Of course, like we talked about, you can buy better filters.
Yeah.
Of course, the kettle, you need a solid kettle, you know. But I think it's somewhat easy to max out your pour over station or your pour over gear pretty quickly, especially with hand grinders.
Yeah.
Now hand grinders, I think they do a little better with pour overs than they do with espresso.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can get what's the K6 Easy Presso or whatever.
Yeah.
Those hand grinders are like, I mean, they're like very affordable. Like if I'm not mistaken, like in the 200s, 300s.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And I really, of course, the EKG kettle.
Yeah.
And boom, you have like a really spanking filter setup that you can brew on par with pretty much any, I think, a cafe.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Pretty
if you have the
easy.
knowledge, at that point, the differential is knowledge,
right,
and experience.
Yeah.
You can definitely. I think one of the things, again, if you're trying to get into filter coffee and it's kind of a new thing for you, I think for a fact, like I remember Maddie's setup in the beginning was like at her house with her roommates, just a classic setup. Like really got the job done. I remember brewing coffee at her house on it was like a gator scale. You know, one of those gator kettles, like gooseneck gator, massive
it's like
thing. Yep. Just a basic scale. Mm-hmm. I think the coffee might have been pre-ground, and then I brought my oat over to her house and we're just using it. And then a classic, even we kind of modded one of those Chemixes with a different basket in it and modded it. And dude, like coffee was, again, like totally fine. And I bet that whole setup cost under $100.
Yeah.
And it was a good introduction. I think sometimes, especially me reading Reddit threads, sometimes people overcomplicate things by buying a ton of accessories. Well, my V60 filters need this holder, like need that, customized Etsy wooden handcrafted holder. And
I mean, they're cool.
They're cool. I'm not judging you for having one. I want the snail one. They're sick, I looked at one of the Etsy listings a few times here and there, so they're sick. Yeah. Like I don't have anything against it, but if you're like trying to decide on like, hey, I want quality coffee versus a custom wooden filter holder, like you can put that on pause. Like don't. I'm not here to squelch your dreams of a wooden custom V60 paper holder. Like, no, that's not the thing. Same thing with the kettle. Like I would always recommend getting a fellow kettle EKG. Like,
100%.
Always. Like the best kettle.
They're so nice.
Like I don't know, even within our context right now, like would you even move to a different kettle if you had the option? Like I don't think I would. I'm thinking of the other kettles that are around. I still prefer the fellow one. So like, and then I remember when just Maddie copped that off of Amazon, that Gator kettle, like, yeah, it's not a fellow kettle. It pours at a different flow rate. But I think the cool thing is if you have a very basic setup, it actually challenges you to actually think about coffee extraction rather than how all of this gear stuff, like, so you can actually become a better home barista by having gear that you need to work with and work around with, challenges your brewing, and you don't have to spend that much money. Now, again, if you do have the money, it's 100%, like, again, Akai scale, like, that's another thing. Would you upgrade your Akai scale to a Tally Pro? Is that Tally Pro? Is that the name of the fellow scale? Yeah. It's more expensive than Akai.
I mean, I'm going back as low as I want to go to Proud Mary, and they have those like those janky Proud Mary branded like Amazon scales that they sell.
Exactly.
That are like they're accurate. They show grams. They have a timer, I think, on there, but they don't look flashy like those other ones.
Exactly.
And I'm like, at the end of the day, I like aesthetics. I like stuff to look cool. I love it. I'm going to pay extra for it. Like, fine, you got me. But at the end of the day, it's also like, okay, will this tell me that I've poured 300 grams of water in? Great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's one thing I think, if you had what's the most important piece of equipment? I guess it would be the same answer for filter than espresso.
The filter, same thing. Grinder.
Always.
Like,
if you're going to splurge on a piece.
More or less, I think actually even more so. Because it's just grounds.
Yeah.
And you're the one pouring the water in.
Yeah,
With espresso, it's important, but if your machine can't generate the right pressure, or it's got some,
Yeah.
temperature fluctuation issues, or stuff like that,
Yeah.
that might actually hinder your taste,
Mm-hmm.
then you actually like, it's just as important. But here it's just like grounds, and you're the one pouring the water,
Yeah.
and so the only thing there is literally your grinder.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
working for you. That's it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's why it's also like we talk about this so much.
Yeah.
Is that the grinder is gonna play a big role in your brew.
Yeah.
So-
Yes, this episode is going way longer than I thought it would, but that's kind of cool. So the other final little touch up, because this podcast dedicates so much airtime to batch brewers, because we've been talking about batch brew coffee in the last 3 or 4 episodes.
The last 160 episodes.
Yeah, too. Yeah, but specifically the last 3, we've kind of been on this like, we've been an echo of like a batch brew tastes so good. Like, but this and that. Does the podcast need an upgrade of a batch brewer?
I don't think it's necessary. The Precision Brewer, the Breville Precision Brewer slaps. It does a great job. But am I trying to snag an Aiden ASAP?
Come on, fellow.
Yes, we're working on that.
On it.
So
yeah.
What I said earlier in this episode was I actually am curious about picking one up because I think it can do a stellar job. Yeah. Journey just posted like an interesting compare of like an X Bloom versus like an Aiden.
Oh, sick.
And I think it was like a story post with I think his wife was just blind tasting and she chose the Aiden.
Whoa, wild.
And batch brewers nowadays are killer.
Yeah.
Like they're amazing. The automation, the easiness, the quality of brew.
Yeah. I mean, one big shout out to all of my home baristas. I'm thinking of Jimmy right now, who recently had a kid or is pregnant right now.
Yes.
Please, your baby registry has to have a batch brewer. That's absolute must. Like I've been talking about this for the last couple of months too at my house. Like, do we need a new batch brewer for certain reasons? Like, I'm thinking of Jimmy. Like, didn't Jimmy buy a batch brewer? Didn't Jimmy have a batch brewer on his baby registry? Like,
I have no idea.
I'm like,
but it makes sense.
Anyone listening to this podcast who's about to be a parent, first time, and if you're not a first time parent, you know that sometimes making a nice batchy while you're having tummy time with your kiddo, newborn, it's game over. Especially if it's an Aiden, especially like for me, it's been a ratio, like game changer, absolute game changer. Coffee tastes good, easy to brew. You don't have to worry about pulsating. You can let it brew, and if you even forget to take off the filter and it's still sitting in there with the filter, sick, dude. Like it's still staying warm. Like there's been plenty of times where I started my batch brewing, like 30 minutes later, I'm like, oh, sick. It's just the filter and the thing is still sitting on top. I just remove it. It's good to go. Solid. So it's a little plug there.
I just walk out right now. That's it. That's all you need to know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But yeah, that's that. I think, I think for the most part is, where was I? I had a thought that just completely disappeared. But yeah, you got me thinking now about upgrading grinders because we talked about it so much. So maybe I'll talk through a few options and see if I can get a Weber. That'd be sick for an upgrade.
Would be nice.
I mean, if anyone disagrees with me, please call me out in the comment section.
Yeah. There it is, folks. Another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.